Good evening, all. Today we are going to discuss about haiku poems. Haiku poems are one of the most short form of poetry that we see in modern age, but it can be dated back, it can be traced back to 9th century BC, and its origin is in the country of Japan. The Japanese haiku is very lyrical. It's very short, succinct, and also expresses intense form of poetry. The poet can express his innermost feelings in through this haiku form. And because it has only 3 lines and 17 syllables, the poem actually is a condensed expression of the poet's thought process, his feelings, and his ideas about the world around him, nature, and also about the transient nature of the world. So let us begin by tracing back the haiku poetry to its origin. Also, let us have a look at the modern haikus that's been written, and also we will try to create our own haiku by the end of this class. So let's begin. I'm going to now share my screen and show you a small presentation about how haiku came into being. These, as I said, are traditionally Japanese poems. It consists of 3 lines, 3 very short lines, which do not rhyme. So we do not have the lines rhyming with each other. It consists of 17 syllables. The rule is 5 in the first line, 7 in the second line, and again 5 on the third line. The origin of haiku poems can be traced back as far as the 9th century, and it considered it is considered to be a type of poetry that looks at the physical world and also interprets some inner meaning, a deeper meaning, and also the very existence of nature, the transience nature of the life. And one of the great masters, Basho, who had actually mastered the haiku poetry, we will see some of his examples in the next slide. So here is Matsuo Basho, a look at the great master who had actually mastered this art form, this poetry form. And these are some of the examples from his poems. I'll just read out 1 or 2 of them. Wrapping dumplings in bamboo leaves with 1 finger, she tidies her hair. So as you see, the thought is so simple, but it is also, if we think about it, it also expresses beauty. It also expresses the simplicity of the existence. Another poem, oh, these spring days, a nameless little mountain wrapped in morning haze. So as we see, it's a nature poem, and it also talks about the beauty of these mountains and the season that Matsuo Basho has written about. So all these poems are very short, very condensed form of expression, yet it talks about simplicity, which Matsuo Basho had called the karumi, and also it talks about the quality of being self-forgetful. Now, in the era where it is only talks about self-importance, Basho's poetry is full of quality of self-forgetfulness, which he calls the muga. So Basho's poetry is full of the karumi, which is simplicity, and the moga. So these two terms we need to remember when we also read about haiku poems, especially Basho's poetry. And going forward, I would also say that these haikus, these form of haiku poetry, were adopted by the imagists during the 20th century, during the World War II. And today, the form of haiku has changed, it has been modernized, it has been adapted to the new, new kind of lifestyle that we live, and it expresses our new doubts, our new kind of existential crisis through these haiku poems. But we cannot go forward discussing about haiku poems if we do not have a look at who Basho was, because he was one of the creators and he had mastered this art form. So before we go ahead, let's take a look at his life, at Basho's life, and also we get a small glimpse about Eastern philosophy through Basho's poem. Okay, so let's do that. It's a short 5-minute video which we will watch, and then we will continue with the discussion on haiku poem.
In the West, we have a vague sense that poetry is good for our souls, makes us sensitive and wiser, yet we don't always really know how this should work. Poetry has a hard time finding its way into our lives in any practical sense. In the East, however, some poets, like the 17th century Buddhist monk and poet Matsuo Basho, knew precisely what effect their poetry was meant to produce. It was a medium designed to guide us to wisdom and calm, as these terms are defined in Zen Buddhist philosophy. Basho was born in 1644 in Uego, in the Iga province of Japan. As a child, he became a servant of the nobleman Todo Yoshitada, who taught him to compose poems in the haiku style. Traditionally, haikus contain 3 parts, 2 images and a concluding line which helps juxtapose them. Old pond, a frog leaps in, water sound. This is the best-known haiku in Japanese literature, and it's called Old Pond by Basho himself. It's all deceptively simple, and when one's in the right, generous frame of mind, very beautiful.
Actually, though it's simple, haiku poetry is a condensed form of much deeper thought. So when we think about it, the simplicity is only deceptive. It actually does express much deeper in layers and layers. You can peel a haiku poem and you can go deeper and deeper to reach very, very intense and very, you know, the philosophical truths of life. Okay, so let's continue.
After Yoshitada died in 1666, Basho left home and wandered for many years before moving to the city of Edo, where he became famous and widely published. However, Basho grew melancholy and often shunned company, and so, until his death in 1694, he alternated between travelling widely on foot and living in a small hut on the outskirts of the city. Basho was an exceptional poet, but he didn't believe in the modern idea of art for art's sake. Instead, he hoped that his poetry would bring his readers into special mental states valued in Zen Buddhism. His poetry reflects 2 of the most important Zen ideals, wabi and sabi. Wabi means satisfaction with simplicity and austerity, while sabi means an appreciation of the imperfect. It was nature, more than anything else, that was thought to foster wabi and sabi, and it's therefore unsurprisingly one of Basho's most frequent topics. Take this spring scene, which appears to ask so little of the world and is attuned to an appreciation of the everyday. First cherry, budding, by peach blossoms. Basho's poetry is of an almost shocking simplicity at the level of theme. There are no analyses of politics or love triangles or family dramas. The point is to remind readers that what really matters is to be able to be content with our own company, to appreciate the moment we're in, and to be attuned to the very simplest things life has to offer, like the changing of the seasons, the sound of our neighbours laughing across the street, the little surprises we encounter each day. Take this gem, violets, how precious, on a mountain path. Basho also used natural scenes to remind his readers that flowers, weather, and other natural elements are, like our own lives.
So in Basho's poetry, we see a repetition of the nature theme. And more than now, we need to appreciate this, that, the simplistic things in life are always gives us most pleasures, and we need to go back to simplicity, make our lives uncomplicated. Uh, in this year, I think in 2020, that's one of the biggest learnings, that uncomplicated life would lead to deriving simplistic pleasures. And haiku poems, especially Basho's poetry, is a living example of that.
Ever changing and fleeting. Time and the changing of weathers and scenes need to be attended to as harbingers of our own deaths. This transience of life may sometimes be heartbreaking, but it's also what makes every moment valuable. Yellow rose petals, thunder, a waterfall. Basho liked to paint as well as write, and many of his works still exist, usually with the related haikus written alongside them. This painting by Basho depicts this very haiku. In literature, Basho valued karumi, lightness. He wanted it to seem as if children had written it. He abhorred pretension and elaboration, as he told his disciples, "In my view, a good poem is one in which the form of the verse and the joining of its two parts seem light as a shallow river flowing over its sandy bed." The ultimate goal of this lightness was to allow readers to escape the burdens of the self, one's own petty particularities and circumstances, in order to experience unity with the world beyond. Basho believed that poetry could, at its best, allow one to feel a brief sensation of merging with the natural world. One may become, through language, the leaf, the waters, the stars, leading one to an enlightened frame of mind known as muga, loss of awareness of oneself. We can see Basho's concept of muga, or self-forgetting, at work in the way he invites us almost to inhabit his subjects, even if they are some rather unpoetic dead fish. Fish shop, how cold the lips of salted bream. In a world full of social media profiles and crafted resumes, it might seem odd to want to escape our individuality. After all, we carefully groom ourselves to stand out from the rest of the world. Basho reminds us that muga, or self-forgetting, is valuable because it allows us to break free from the incessant thrum of desire and incompleteness which otherwise haunts all human lives.
Okay, so we will stop here. So this was one of, a glimpse into Basho's poems, his life, and haiku reached one of the zenith, peak of its art form during Basho's time, and he made it so popular in his lifetime and after his death. There were thousands and millions of Japanese budding poets who imbibed this form of poetry and made it their own. And slowly in 20th century, not only in Japan, but in the entire world, this form of poetry became very, very popular and prevalent. And I'm going to read out now a few examples of the English haiku form. So here it goes. Night, cloud appear and bring to men a chance to rest, looking at the moon. It always has a much deeper meaning. It's very, very deceptive what you see. If you keep thinking about it and peeling the layers, you would reach at a very deeper meaning than one that you see. Again, one more example. I would continue again. So, alone, won't you come and see loneliness? Just one leaf from the kiri tree. Now, before we go ahead, we have to ask ourselves, what are syllables? Syllable is a unit of sound that creates meaning in a language. Consonants join vowels to create these small units. So before we go forward, I like to explain one haiku poem, by breaking the syllables. Like crunchy cornflakes, goat leaves rustle underfoot, beauty in decay. So let's break this small poem, which is called October's Gold. Like crunchy cornflakes. So there are 5 syllables. Gold leaves rustle underfoot. So now there are 7 syllables. B-U-T-I-N-D-K. So again, there are 5 syllables. Now this needs practice. If you have not done it before, you can do that. Syllables are easy to break. All you need to do is practice. So you take smaller, you take small poems, or you could take haikus, and you break the syllables and practice. So haiku always has this golden rule, which is 5-7-5 syllable, 3 line. It's always 3 line, and the second line uses an adjective most of the time, and doesn't. All the 3 lines, they do not rhyme. Now, how do we create a haiku? You can use this syllable matrix to make your own haiku poem. Now, haiku poem at first might not be so easy to create. You can take a certain topic, any topic you feel you want to write on. I understand not everyone is a poet, but we can all give it a shot, give it a try. So here is something that you create, you do on your own, an exercise. Use the 5-7-5 rule. Choose your favorite season, because haikus, especially Japanese haikus, were mostly written on season, on something very, about the beauty of the nature. So those kind of topics you can take and use this, or hopefully you're taking a screenshot, use this syllable matrix to create your own haiku. So before I go today, again, I remind you the couple of things, golden rules about haiku: the 5-7-5 rule, the 3-line stanza rule, the short and crisp method, or the short and crisp writing style of a haiku, and some intense thought about beauty, about transient nature, about your own feelings, your expression, but it should be in this format. Haiku follows a certain format. Before I go today, just a glimpse of what the next class will bring. This is also a nature poem called Coming, which I will cover, or I will take up in the next class. And definitely haiku, knowing how haiku or nature poetry in the Japanese form of poem, haiku, was written, and trying to write your own will definitely give you a glimpse of other nature poets and how beautifully they have combined their own expression, thought, feeling to with the beauty of nature, to their understanding of nature and what it made them feel. So goodbye today. I end the class by reminding you about your short assignment, and I hope you will be sending it to me for me to correct it, for me to help you out. So bye-bye, and I would bid goodbye and meet you in the next class. So bye to all. Stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.